African proverb says the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down. To feel the warmth, what time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire? When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids/groups of kids and the school showed so little interest in helping me. I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and not an eye was batted. When I finally took my mom's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to see that this average height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles. He wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying, and if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. Sorry that happened, and that the teacher showed no empathy. I can say that many teachers don't have the capacity for classroom management. Gonna brag, that shit never happened in my class without it being recognized. I once had a girl make fun of an autistic classmate. He was high functioning, but obviously had social difficulties. She made fun of him in front of the class. I casually told the boy to go to the main office to get me a red science pencil or something made up. Once he left, I tore that girl a new one, and when I was done with her, I ripped the other kids for sitting there and allowing it to happen. I explained to them how being indifferent to abuse/bullying is just as bad. That shit was just not tolerated in my class. I told them if they learn nothing about math or science in my class, I had them for both subjects. 6th grade, I'm going to at least teach them to be decent human beings. I had a coworker at a non-commission based retail job where a coworker would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit absent a high GSP, AVG hour sales. She would overhear my pitch for cards, required, and then lie to the customer so they would apply. I would have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my coworkers and customers. Now, one time I got lucky and an 18-year kid came in yo buy the most expensive desktop we have on display, 2.5k. She saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount, but my radio was dead. Coworker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone cold ignores me. I go for the manager. She prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to him. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale. BC she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer, he was mortified. I was literally told by my boss ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does stuff like that. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I filed an hours complaint regarding her and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. They all got reamed for it. Only one is still in a management position. The rest were eventually demoted or laid off. The theater department at my college, despite building their entire persona on empathy, was the judgiest, cliquiest, least empathetic group of people I've ever known. If you weren't part of the in crowd, you weren't given the same support. There were many of us that existed on the outskirts, working so hard just to see the same few people get all the opportunities, even as far as being cast in lead roles after they graduated. As I struggled with depression, anxiety, and undiagnosed ADHD, I worked tirelessly to keep up with my peers, only to be told I needed to apply myself more. I saw people put in half the work some of us did and end up with higher grades. One professor actually gave arbitrary grades to the 4+ HOURS of homework he assigned, based on page counts, and who he thought deserved a higher grade. I tried so hard to get no support in return. that I became incredibly suicidal and had to take a semester off to deal with my mental health. It only took 2 more years and another medical break before I finally was able to graduate. I had a similar experience. The entire school was preparing for this huge musical. I was part of the tech crew, so sound, lights, etc. There was this one girl, part of the clique, who was the only nice one, especially to me. We met in private at times and she would text me a lot. Then in the week before the first show of the musical, she humiliated me by claiming she was just pranking me, showing others in front of me our private texts, and then admitting that she started to date one of my best friends already. I felt so destroyed. On the day she performed, I was doing the lights and another kid the sound. He had everything set up for the song and left for the bathroom while she was about to start singing. I saw all the controls for her mic on the soundboard, and as she opened her mouth I slowly turned down her monitor speaker. For everyone who doesn't know, the monitor is just heard on stage by the singer. It's so that you can actually hear yourself sing, with all the music etc next to you. Without, it's like singing while holding your ears closed. It will basically sound like you have no feel for tone, because without the monitor you don't. This was over 8 years ago. I'm still very good friends with the guy she actually dated. He told me she was really insane. The type to send death threats after him not texting back for 5 minutes after they broke up. I was raised in a cult. There were 11 kids, with 4 moms, and the leader had really convinced our moms that he was the Archangel Michael. I tried to run away over and over in my late teenage years, hiking across the desert in the dark to get to the highway, where I would try to hitch a ride. Every single time, well-intentioned truckers called the police to report a little girl walking along the highway with her thumb out. I'm short, and I had been malnourished my entire childhood. So even after I turned 18, I was underdeveloped and couldn't convince anyone I was an adult. Michael always called me in as a runaway and the cops would take me back. The last time, I was 20, and I felt so hopeless when I saw the police lights. I thought very seriously about trying to attack the officer with my knife that I always brought in case I was picked up by a crazy person. I knew I was too small and weak to actually hurt the officer, but he would be obliged to arrest me and send me to jail. It was the only way out I could think of. I actually have a story for this. So I was a senior that was friends with 4 juniors in a friend group. I wasn't exactly part of their group, but they seemed to enjoy my company. I was both the funny friend and the therapist friend. I helped them through their prom fiasco when they were at odds with each other. I made them food on occasion. At my graduation, they all said that we should get together as a group and do something fun and bonding before I left for college. One of them even says that she would plan a party for us all. A month passes by. I invite them all to see a movie. One by one, they flake during the week before the movie. I end up going to see it alone. Another month passes, and they've maintained radio silence. Over the next few months, I try to invite them to various events, and without fail, none of them end up being available. I ask them about doing something together, and no dice. All the while, I watch their Instagram posts of going to a lake, and having a lake party, or having a New Year's Eve party together. Now, here I am, typing this out on Reddit, before going to bed, and waking up tomorrow, to go out of state for college. Recently had something similar happen to me. I had a pretty sizable friend group, about 8 people, before I moved states a few years ago. I've kept in touch with most of them through DMS and the like. I told them I was coming to visit for a week months in advance, and we all even discussed dates and plans as the date got closer. We even had the time set. In the last few days before the agreed upon date, everyone cancelled. I only had 2 people left the day before we planned to meet, and they cancelled last minute for bullshit reasons. If they didn't want to hang out, why did we bother setting specific plans on a specific time and date? I had a lot of fun hanging out with the other friend I was staying with though. At least I know who to not make plans with next year. When I was in 7th grade my parents got divorced. My anger and sadness continued to grow. One Thursday night my father picked up my siblings for the obligatory meal out. I declined to go. I went into my room and started fucking around with my chemistry set. Picture this setting, a farmhouse built in 1830, burlap walls in my bedroom, hundreds and hundreds of comic books, and wall-to-wall carpeting. Your standard tinder box. Instead of using a Bunsen burner for my heat source, get this, I used an empty plastic margarine container. And instead of practicing any other safety protocol, I set the fuel on the carpet and lit it. Surprise, the plastic melted almost immediately, and the fuel soaked the carpet. Before I knew what happened, flames were licking the walls and furniture. At this point I had the good sense to yell fire to my mother, who was blissfully unawares in the kitchen. She dialed 911, while the child genius ran in and out of the inferno trying to save his marvels and DCs. Thankfully the emergency services got there quickly and were able to contain the damage to my bedroom. It was completely blackened. For years I thought the whole thing was a terrible accident. Only as an older adult can I admit to one simple fact: my pain and need to be seen manifested in the torching of my own room.